So this is a joint council NEDAC meeting, and so welcome everybody to this meeting. I do have to ask if anyone has any declarations of pecuniary interest, and I see none. So we're going to move forward with the agenda as I described earlier, but in brief, we are going to be engaging in a strategic planning exercise, and that's going to be led by Glenn Poitier, who I've worked with before and does an outstanding job. And so at this point, I will turn it over to Glenn, and we'll go from there and just try to remember these devices on your table, please. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Let me pick up the device. And I guess I'll get out of here so I'm not in the light, and I think I'm sort of visible now when we're streaming, I hope. Otherwise, it'll be a disembodied voice. Okay, so let me begin by saying good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting. And thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I know there's a lot of things that compete for your time and your attention, and your interest in new markets, economic future, your interest in the ongoing vibrancy and success of the town is very much appreciated. So thank you again for coming out. I look forward, as I'm sure to you, to a very productive and valuable session. For those of you who haven't met me, again, as the mayor mentioned, my name is Glenn Poitier. I'm the head of a firm called GLPI, and it'll be my pleasure to serve as the independent facilitator, if you will, trying to lead us through a fairly full agenda over the next number of hours. I've had the privilege of working with NEDAC and with Newmarket on a bunch of different projects over the years, and I will look to continue to apply that knowledge as we work through our session this afternoon and into the evening. So what are we up to? The agenda title and what I've got on the slide here really says a lot. Our defined focus is the Economic Development Strategic Plan. And I want to emphasize that because I know that there are a lot of other issues that go into community building and so forth, and they have connections to economic development. But for us today, we very much want to stay focused on the economic strategy components of what the town is about. So we don't have to get into today, parks and recreation and all the other things that we do. So I wanted to let everybody know that. The second thing is, and more specifically, it's the second part of the title, we want to help scope the potential 2020 to 2024 strategy initiatives. We're not going to finalize anything today. In fact, we'll talk later about next steps, but one of the key next steps will be for Chris and other staff at the town to go away and take all of the good information that we've surfaced this afternoon and think it through, do some further analysis, and come back to you with a proposed strategy. So today our job is really to help map out what those initiatives might look like, what they might be, and to get a sense of those which are priorities. So we want to tap your big brains to do all of that. And that kind of, again, takes some of the pressure off. We don't have to finalize the list today because that will be part of future exercises, but we do want to make sure that you get your stuff out. So don't be shy. We want to make sure that we get it all on the table. And so in terms of our agenda, we're obviously in the opening remarks right now. And then so that we're not starting from scratch and that we build on good work that's already been done, I'm going to invite Chris Callio to take us through both what York Region is looking at doing in terms of their economic thrust, and I'll put that on screen in a few minutes. And then he's also going to take us through an initial list of initiatives, some of which are already underway, some of which could be started if you believe they are priorities, and that'll help seed the discussion. But we're not going to stop there. After we've done that, I'm going to invite you to top up the list. So in essence, I'm going to say, what didn't Chris cover that you think is important as a potential economic strategy initiative? So we'll have a chance for you to make sure that you get that stuff out and on the table, and that's an important part of the meeting. Once we've done that, we're going to move into what we're calling the assessment criteria, because ultimately there needs to be some rubric, some way to decide how do we choose from 20 different or 30 different strategies and get it down to a manageable number. And I hope that you believe as I do, and I know the mayor has heard me say this before, I do a lot of strategic planning. I'm working on about 5 or 6 for different regions and municipalities right now. I do this for corporations, for not-for-profits. I'm very fond of the saying that strategy is as much about deciding what not to do as it is about deciding what to do. And that means making choices. That means identifying priorities. And so to get there, I'm going to engage you in a little discussion around the criteria that we might use to assess those potential strategy initiatives. I'll seed the discussion with a few, but I'm going to look to you to, again, top that up and make sure that we've got a very full list. After we've done that, we'll go into our dinner break. And then we will go into what we're calling, somewhat jokingly, but somewhat seriously, the Dragon's Den component of the afternoon and evening. And what we're going to invite you to do there, and I'll tell you more when we get to it, is to engage in some breakout group discussions wherein you're going to build your own mini strategies. You're going to identify what you believe are some of the key objectives that the economic development strategy should be pursuing. We're going to ask you to limit yourselves to identifying your kind of top 5 game-changing initiatives that you think can make the greatest difference over the next number of years. And we're also going to invite you for each of those initiatives to identify the role that NEDAC might play in helping to advance it. And that could be just providing advice. It could be playing a more hands-on role. That's what we want to understand from you. Once each table has done that, we're going to invite that table to present to the whole group in the spirit of kind of trying to convince your colleagues in the room that in fact your strategy is worth investing in, that it's the right one, that you're focused on the right game-changing initiatives. And it'll be interesting to see the degree to which there is some overlap, and then we'll look to get your feedback on what you're hearing. Not feedback from the point of view that I'm looking for somebody to say, I'll give you $1 million for 10% of your ideas, but rather just, is that making sense to you? Is it resonating? What's working? What's not? So we'll do all of that, then we'll talk briefly about next steps. We'll have a brief open forum if there are any other questions, comments, observations that perhaps didn't logically fit into the other agenda components. We'll deal with them then, and then I'll invite perhaps the mayor, if he would so like, to share a few closing comments before we formally wrap things up, given that this is, again, a joint workshop of NEDAC and Council. And a couple of sort of housekeeping items, if I might. Just very quickly, I wanted to reiterate a few of the things that we've talked about already. But the first thing is, it's an ambitious agenda, but it is doable if we keep the following phrase in mind, and that phrase is progress, not perfection. We don't have to dot every I and cross every T today. And in fact, we're not even going to get into a discussion of vision. We're not going to get into a discussion of NEDAC mission or of actions. We're going to stay at the level of strategic initiatives for today. The second thing I wanted to mention or just reinforce is, please do use these mics. Though we will hear you, the folks who are trying to watch this through the live streaming will not if this is not reasonably close to you. So it's not enough for it to just be on the edge of the table. Try to keep it within, 2 or 3 feet. Would that be reasonable of your mouth? And then secondly, I won't be so delusional as to believe I can get you to turn off your personal communications devices. You're all important people. You need to stay connected. I get that. But if you'd be so kind as to put them in the silent or vibrate mode, that would be much appreciated so that it doesn't disturb others. I think all of you have tent cards in front of you. If you'd be so kind as to kind of turn them towards the front, that would be much appreciated so that we can see who you are. Yeah, I'm just working on the assumption you know who you are, so it'd be good if I knew who you were. And then I think most of you have been here before, but if you're looking for the washrooms, the closest set is just out the door to the right there, not too far away at all. The last thing I'll mention is that we could have members of the public join us in progress, because this is an open meeting. Obviously, it's being casted, but we could also have people attend in person, and that's done in the interest of openness and transparency. And if we get some folks here, we'll invite them to sit in the back as observers, not as active participants in the meeting. So we've done the introduction, so that saves that time. What I wanted to do, though, was just a really quick exercise, if you'll indulge me. And all you have to do for the moment is turn to somebody beside you, and one of you decide who's going to be the hand and which of you is going to be the fist. That's all you need to do. Figure it out. Go ahead. Okay, everybody ready? So I love that. Did you say which are you feeling like today? I love that. Okay, so I gotta put this down just so I can do this. I think I'm close enough still to it. I'll speak loudly. So all I want you to do now is whoever's the hand, put your hand up. Whoever's the fist, now quick safety moment, like don't really slug the person, but all I want you to do, yeah, sorry about that. I know you're disappointed, Merrick and others. All I want you to do is the person who's the fist, push against the hand. Go ahead. Okay, and if you'd stop, that's fine. So I was scanning quickly. I don't think I missed anybody, and correct me if I did, but this is what I saw happen. I did not see this happen. I didn't see a single hand let the fist push through. And there's a reason for that. It reflects our natural inclination. When somebody pushes, we push back, often with at least equal force. And so all I wanted to do by way of that quick exercise is invite us today, because I know some of you have come into the room today with a clear idea of what you want to see as the economic strategy initiatives, and they may be right, they may be wrong. All I'm saying is, let's let ideas live for a little while. Let's be open to somebody kind of maybe pushing us in a new direction. Doesn't mean you have to cave or give in. We'll kill bad ideas at the right time, but let's at least let them live for a little while this afternoon and hear what people have to say. So, with that, are there any questions about the agenda or what we're up to, or can we invite Chris Callio to begin to take us through the overview presentation? We're good? Great. I'm really looking forward to working with you. Thank you again for coming out. I'll flip the slides over for you. Chris, have you got a mic? Yeah, you got to turn it green. Great.
Thanks, Glenn. We've provided you an overview, an orientation, so you have a good idea of the economy and what we're trying to achieve, what we've done over the past 4 years. So what we want to do tonight, and these are in no particular order, it's a way to start the discussion. We have about 8 or 9 potential strategies that we see that may be something that we would like to focus on over the next 4 years. We want to open up the channel of discussion to see if you agree with that. But later on, like Glenn said, we also want to add to it. And at some point, we're not tied to these. We may very well take them right off the list. But to start the discussion, I do want to tell you a little bit about what York Region is doing. We count on York Region Economic Development a lot because we're a small department. There's just Elizabeth and I, and Ian helps out. They have a full department, and they're undergoing a brand new economic development strategy. I'll give you an example of how they helped us. When we were trying to attract Celestica, they were really, really good in providing the detailed data that we needed to convince Celestica to come to Newmarket. So we count on them a lot. So it's in our interest to align what we're trying to do with what York Region is trying to do. They are going to their council in November, so it hasn't been approved yet, but these are some of the major areas that they are looking at. And I just want to run through them very quickly. And I need you to keep these in mind as we have our discussions tonight. I will provide this presentation at each table for future reference. But for instance, they are looking at establishing a regional smart cities working group, an internal group at the region to start talking about how York Region can become more of a smart city. As you're aware, in our orientation, we've focused on intelligent community and smart cities over the last 4 years. We're not quite sure where it's going, but they are starting that process starting in January probably and going forward for the next 4 years. York Region used to be in the tourism business. They had a very strong tourism marketing presence that they spent a lot of money. They've got out of that business, and what they're looking at now is getting back into the tourism marketing business. They have deferred to Toronto Global, which is a Toronto area-wide foreign direct investment agency that has had some success. I know some of the outlying communities haven't been overly happy with how Toronto Global has performed. So they are taking a look in the new strategy about getting more into their own foreign direct investment program. And for a region of 1.2 million people and 500,000 employees, maybe they need to take a stronger stand in promoting York Region as an investment location and not depend on an organization that is, from an outsider's look, from a number of the communities, seems to be a bit Toronto-centric. They are also looking at, they have a brand called YorkLink. It's a marketing campaign that focuses on the corridors. We are part of the regional centers and corridors. They do a lot of social media and other marketing to advance the centers and corridors for housing and office development. They see a lot of growth in the future, economic growth tied to office development on the corridors. So they're looking at putting more effort into the centers and corridors. Again, keeping these in mind with some of the things we've been working on over the past 4 years. They want to provide more support to emerging clusters like the health sector, environment, AI, and automation, and there were a couple others that they listed, but I just put those in. So what that means, we're not quite sure, but they will flesh out their action plans in these areas. Even though York University is going into Markham, they still want to look at further post-secondary investment opportunities. Again, in the past, we, as a group with Newmarket, had applied to get the campus. We weren't successful, but we had a group here that was looking at other opportunities in the post-secondary space. So if they're starting to look at other opportunities, where do we stand? We are a regional center in Northern York Region. We have everything, a hospital, we have the shopping, we have the government services. Do we have post-secondary? We don't. Is that something that we're lacking in this community to be a true regional center? They're going to undertake a lot of, many more actions in attracting talent. This has come up in our past discussions. A lot of our companies are saying they're having a difficult time attracting talent. So they're going to be undertaking more activities to try to position York Region as a successful location to bring talent to support emerging industries. And finally, in case you don't know, they have this York Region Small Business Enterprise Center based in their building on Yonge Street. It supports small business startups and marketing and all those types of activities for the northern 6 communities, including Newmarket. So a lot of small retail businesses will go through them. They give them help in starting a business, and they have programs that we send clients, and they will continue to do that. So that's where York Region may be going. Again, we can keep those as a referral as we go into our discussions later on.
So Chris is now going to transition into talking about some of those potential strategy initiatives that you might want to list as game changers later. So it'll be important to kind of follow along. We'll take any questions you might have afterwards. We've asked Chris to not betray any of his personal biases about which of these he feels most strongly about, and kind of keep it to what is the initiative, where is it at, why is it important? Take it away.
And they're not in any order of significance, so just so you know. Marketing in the corridors, it's important for us, and we've been doing this for the past 2 years through Elizabeth's efforts primarily, to change the image of Newmarket. But it's really to attract housing developments to our corridors so that employees can get the type of labor that they need for their companies. It's been expressed to us that we do not have housing choices that enable our primarily tech companies and some of our manufacturers to attract employees and retain their employees because there aren't enough housing options. The other aspect of it is about office development. We don't have a whole lot of land in the community, so we see the future growth of this community happening through hopefully office development on our corridors. Where we stand right now, we've gone through a 2-year campaign. We have to review where we go in the future over the next couple of years. So we're at the point now where we're just taking a look at where we go. And some of our marketing methods. Do we need to look at new ways of doing things? We have a media relations firm in Toronto that's hammering away at some of the publications and news media down in Toronto to sell Newmarket, but are there new approaches that we can do to attract millennials, to get the ICI sector and businesses excited about coming to Newmarket? And finally, why it's important, because again, we need to align with what York Region might be doing as they go forward over the next 4 years. Incentives. it's interesting that York Region has just passed, just in the last month, has passed incentives for both affordable rentals and also office development. And this slide was made before Mayor Taylor was very active in trying to reduce that office development from 100,000 square feet down to a minimum size for northern communities of 75,000 square feet. So we have a proposal right now on our corridors for an office building, a building of about 96,000 square feet, but the ground floor is retail. So the office component is about 76,000. So under that program, as it's written now, they would not qualify, but now they will qualify. The key point is the local municipality must participate or you are not eligible for the funding. So they must participate in a similar, if not better, deferral exemption or other program. So what the region is looking at is development charge deferrals depending on the size and scale of the development. Minimum of 5 years, which is a big incentive that they are offering. The other thing we have is our community improvement plan. We have a policy instrument in place, mostly in our downtown core that goes up to Davis Drive, that we have a whole range of things. We can do tax increment financing. We can waive planning and building fees. We can waive development charges. We can do a whole bunch of things to encourage development. We have the policy instrument in place already that we could do extra things if we really feel it's important to try to drive development, especially we call it the Soda area south of Davis Drive. So from Davis Drive down to the top of the hill on Main Street, if you think of that area as the next area for development, it's potentially there. So this is happening. It's in place I guess it's in place, right, John? Council approved it, or I think it's starting January of 2020. So that's the status, and we have to look at how we can tie into that program.
So I see a few quizzical looks. Just a quick check-in. Are there any quick questions of fact or clarification for Chris about any of the initiatives so far? We're good? Okay. And I'm still using the mic. It's here. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Thank you.
Okay. We have found that through our corporate visitation program, we are generating a lot of good dialogue with our local companies. And we're finding about their challenges, about their growth opportunities, and about their satisfaction levels in Newmarket. We've certainly helped a huge number of companies here at the town hall with trying to overcome certain challenges that they have to proceed with their developments. We see this as a critical part of the function of economic development. And the other side that we're looking at is we're finding out from these companies, as I mentioned before, that skilled labor is an identified issue. The housing options, the distance factor, transit options is all things that our companies are telling us that need to be addressed in order for them to be successful. So it's something that we need to keep in mind as we go forward to try to encourage our further development and work with our local companies to grow. Just in case you don't know, the common statistic that is quoted that about 70% of your local economic job creation is done by local companies and about 30% is done by foreign direct investment. So keep those ratios. So if we can keep our local companies happy, then we should see economic growth and job creation. The last 4 years, we've put a lot of effort into this intelligent community, smart city council or smart city movement. Again, you saw York Region is moving into that area now. I think they're doing it. They've been part of our group that we've had meeting. They've seen the value. They've brought in a broadband strategy. They've put together YorkNet. What's the teller? YorkNet, sort of a dark fiber network. So what is our role going to be over the next 4 years? Is it important for Newmarket to be at the forefront? Are we going to lead? If we are going to lead, what does it mean in this area? Both at an internal level here and also in the community. We have a Smart City Council that's a community-based organization, as I mentioned to you. And we also have Envy, which is our community-based internet broadband service that is up and running. It's been operational for just over a year now. So is Intelligent Community, Smart City, is that the direction we need to go to be successful and grow our economy in the future? Supporting South Lake's growth and leadership and innovation. And there are a couple things I've asked Rob to give us a very quick update on that first bullet point. So you're aware of where we stand as much as he can tell us publicly at this point. I think it's important that you know where they're going as a direction. While he's doing that, I will just run through. We need to view Southlake as an economic development engine and not just a hospital. It's critical. It's our largest employer in town. And so that whole mindset of it as a partner with the town as an economic generator is critical. Rob, you want to speak to some of those?
Yeah, certainly on the digital piece, I can speak to one particular initiative. As most may know, in health, the formation of Ontario health teams has sort of dominated the landscape through this year. So Southlake was in the first wave along with 31 other groups that were permitted to move forward to full application status. Those were submitted a couple of weeks ago, and we're told that decisions on who will move forward to actual implementation will happen early September. So there's a number of things linked to that. The Southlake Community OHT, as it's called, involves the hospital, 2 different family health teams, and a few other community healthcare partners. And so part of the work related to OHTs is around how do you connect patients digitally, how do you connect providers for better sharing of information. One initiative that's not directly linked to the OHTs, but is a sort of a secondary initiative that the Ministry of Health came out with, or the Digital Health Secretariat, is for patient digital identity authentication and authorization services. And really what that is targeted at is creating, if you like, a digital wallet for patients so that it increases the portability of health information, because personal health information is one of those things that everybody is extremely sensitive around, about privacy, sharing data, who has permission to access that data, what are they allowed to do with that data. So it would help enable sharing some of that information between different health providers, would give the patient more access to their own information, which is quite limited today in lots of circumstances, and give the patient control over who can access that information. The Ministry of Health put out a call for proposals to be development opportunities to build that kind of framework. Southlake submitted an application along with North York General, in partnership with North York General. And we hope to be announced as somebody who can move forward with that proposal shortly. At the moment, although it's health focused, the town of Newmarket did submit letters of support along with a couple of other providers, because we see opportunities down the road that single identity can work for other things as well. So whether that be in a municipal perspective, whether that be for recreational programs through the town or other things, you would have this single digital identity that could be shared across beyond health and into multiple other jurisdictions. So we're hopeful we'll be in the group that can move forward for that.
And the final one is the Create It Now. We were involved with Southlake to try to develop Create It Now. Actually, one of the partners in your digital health initiative is Secure Key, right?
Yep, Secure Key is the name,
one
of the
that
name
kind of
partners, yes.
emerged out of Create It Now, so there's a nice synergy. I just realized that. The other thing I want you to be aware of, other communities are embracing health sector growth, and particularly Vaughan is really moving forward. They just announced last week that, of course, we all know Mackenzie Health is building a new hospital there, but they're calling it a healthcare precinct. And it's apparently a partnership with York University and Venture Lab. Venture Lab is our regional innovation center for York Region. My understanding is that York University may be looking at doing something in their health sciences area and partnering on that campus. So what I'm seeing is Vaughan moving very aggressively to be a leader in healthcare. We are already in York Region are a leader in healthcare, and can we sustain that leadership role? And what can we do as a community to remain a leader in the whole healthcare and the innovation space in healthcare? And you didn't talk about your capital expansion plan, but that's a major thing that you are finalizing at this point?
Yes, so the master plan is there's some community consultations that have been going on over the last few weeks in preparation for a submission to the Ministry of Health early next year. It's a long process to go through, but the kinds of considerations at the moment still very high level, but around how much, based on population growth and other factors, how much demand will there be for hospital services in 10, 15, and 20 years? And beyond, what does that mean for the physical site that Southlake has now? What are the different options? Build up, build out, build across? Whether there's a secondary location somewhere and what services would be at each location. So all of those kinds of things, kinds of things come out. And see at the bottom there you have parking and land for expansion. Parking is an immediate issue. Anything for staff and patients even today. But obviously, if that site gets bigger and more services come, that means more staff, more patients, and parking obviously becomes a challenge there.
Okay, we spent a little more time on Southlake, but there's a lot of issues going on over right now, and a lot of things happening. Any questions?
Well, you said the Ontario Health Team starting when? I think you misspoke on that. I think you said September.
The Ontario Health Team?
Well, if successful.
Oh, December. Sorry.
December.
If I said
September.
December is.
Just want to make sure everybody knows a little closer in September.
Yes, the Ministry of Health is setting up site visits at the moment to come and meet with all the people who submitted their applications out of the 31 who were approved to move forward, and the timeline is supposedly early December is when an announcement will come out about who's moving forward to actual implementation.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
All set?
So, tourism. As you saw, York Region's looking at getting back into the tourism game. We are not directly involved in tourism. We just don't have the resources to be involved in tourism. That being said, could we be a tourism destination? We're certainly a day trip destination, Main Street and things like that. But the province has also come out with legislation to permit communities to put in place what's called a municipal accommodation tax, a MAT, to support enhanced tourism development and promotion. So what happens is usually it's about a 4% surcharge at the accommodation industry. So if you look at a $200 hotel room, you add 4% on. That money then is collected by the municipality, and half of it must go to a tourism organization that is to be set up and totally funded to support tourism marketing in the community. The other half can go to the municipality for any use that it sees that it wants to do. A lot of communities do put it into tourism infrastructure. Some communities take the extra 50% and use it to do things that they otherwise couldn't do because we've got a new source of revenue that's not tax supported or anything like that. So in our case, just doing some very rough numbers, at a 4% and some average room rates, I looked on the various hotels we have, and Merritt, maybe you could speak to this at some point. We could generate, with the existing hotel room space, about $370,000. Half would have to go to this tourism not-for-profit organization, and half would then go to the municipality. So some of the things I'd like you to consider, should we be in the tourism business? I should have mentioned Upper Canada Mall. I think you attract a fair number of tourists from outside this area. I've seen some of your numbers. So we do have some assets, but we just haven't promoted tourism. So should we be in the business or not? And if we are going to be in the business, can we use the MAT to support our efforts in tourism?
Councillor, yeah, I saw you grab the mic.
Yeah,
Jump in.
so I just wanted to find out a little bit of clarity with short-term rentals such as Airbnb would be part of the MAT tax as well, and if so, how would that be getting captured?
We've had, just the status of where we are, we've had one internal meeting to discuss this now. Now there's been some other sort of one-on-one meeting, but we've had one group meeting. Airbnbs and those types of companies were discussed. What we found out is that in other communities, you have to almost go to Airbnb and get them to buy into the premise of this municipal accommodation tax. It does put another layer on trying to collect, but other municipalities have been able to do it. But it is an issue that we would have to address to make it fair across the hotel industry, as well as the online booking hotel or room booking industry. But it is a bit difficult to try to do that. Usually municipalities try to get Airbnb on side with this right at the top. So it is something we would have to look at.
Let's get American, go ahead.
If I may say something as an owner of a hotel, we are in a tertiary market. And if you look at these numbers, with half of it at least being really a tax, and then the other half going into the marketing of tourism, I would also, before I say, first of all, I think it's not a very good idea at this stage because we are just too small in the tertiary market. And second, the cost of implementing this probably would be too much in proportion to what money is being collected. Then we have the Airbnb, which is growing in this town with very competitive because of no regulations, no health standards, no fire issues, and so on and so on. I think that for the market like ours, which is very small, tertiary market, this would defeat the purpose and would be treated by the operators as just another tax.
But Merrick, you're about 45 minutes ahead of us, because those are the conversations we want to have at the tables as we think about which of these are worth pursuing or not. But thank you for sharing the perspective. Any other questions before Chris presses on? Okay, so next one, you're all set?
Just to finalize that, we've been directed by council to look at this as something to go forward on, so we're investigating. Okay, we talked a bit about foreign direct investment. Currently, we don't do a whole lot of, we don't take trade missions. We did take a group over to Scandinavia in 2012 with the hospital, and we met with about 25 companies over there, and it was really an interesting foray into that market. So we focus mostly on European markets. We do not go to China. We do not go to India. I think Vaughn right now is organizing a mission to go to Israel. We don't do major trade missions. We deal through intermediaries like trade commissions in Toronto, foreign chambers of commerce. We do have a number of delegations. I think I mentioned to you, we had a Nordic healthcare delegation back in April. I'm currently working with one of my intermediaries to bring a Ukrainian ICT delegation here in November. So we do some of this, and my question to you, I said 30% of new job creation comes from direct investment from outside the community. How much should we be in this business? Should we put more emphasis in this sector? And also given that York Region is also starting to move more and more into this sector as well.
Answer it later, not now. We'll get into that one. Anything else, Chris, on this one?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think we're getting. And we talked about post-secondary. Again, we had a group, we looked at it, but there are certain smaller things happening. If you look, and I put a couple of examples, Vaughan and Niagara University out of the U.S., Ontario College of Teachers Accredited Education Campus. Brampton put $7.3 million into an expansion of Algoma University for, I think, the business program. Talked about York U Health Sciences expansion in Vaughan. So there are opportunities, and even very specialized things like Aurora had the Canadian Food and Wine Institute going into one of their buildings. And I just put here things like executive leadership programs and things like that. So do we need to take another look at post-secondary again? Why is it important? We are a regional center. We are not a regional center for post-secondary. And finally, downtown. Now, many of these are coming out of council's strategic priorities. And in our previous meetings, we talked about council's priorities, so you're aware of them. But pedestrianizing Main Street, developing that area south of Davis Drive, going towards the Christian Baptist Church, looking at our existing buildings, municipal buildings that are vacant, well, how can we readapt them, reuse them? Parking, wayfinding, using smart technologies. We're totally involved in some waste management strategies in the downtown. And of course, the BIA is involved, and we have events and marketing and joint marketing. We spend a lot of effort and time, I think we've mentioned to you, supporting the BIA, supporting the downtown through our financial incentive program. Council's directed us to really put additional emphasis into the downtown. So the question to you is, how much time and effort should we be putting into the downtown, or can we put resources in other areas? So I think that's where I'll leave that one.
So just before we move on to get your thoughts about additional strategies, first I wanted to thank you, Chris, for that excellent overview. Are there any other quick questions of fact or clarification, anything that Chris took us through that you want further unpacked or clarified? They all made sense? You get it all? Excellent. Okay, so what I'm going to invite you to do now is just have some brief conversations at your tables. You don't even have to write, there are flip charts, but you don't have to write anything down. But what I'm going to ask you after about 5 minutes is the following, and for those of you who've worked with me before, you know I key a lot of stuff in live and in real time. So I'm going to be putting stuff in as we're talking. But what I'm looking for you to do is, if you believe there is an additional strategy or strategy initiatives beyond the ones that Chris has already described, I'm going to ask you at your table to tell us, what is it? Where is it at, if it's started at all, and why does it matter? So the same 3 questions we asked Chris to address. And if you want to give it a label, as Chris gave his labels, or gave those, not his, the initiatives labels, that would be great as well. So if you could at your tables maybe come up with 1 or so additional, if you believe there are additional ones that we need to be thinking about, that's the first task. So just brief conversations, 5 minutes or so. Everybody good to go? Excellent, so we'll get started. By the way, I mentioned we did hand and fist. Later we're gonna do jaw and fist. No, I'm kidding. discussions and we could go for quite a while, but this isn't even the Dragon's Den portion yet. This is just to get some additional strategy ideas on the table. So I'm gonna ask, I'll look, first of all, just give me a show of hands, which tables have additional strategies they'd like to add? So at least one in the back, 2, 3, okay, so it looks like each table may have at least one. So can I start, Donna, with the table in the back? So do you have a label for this, first of all? What are you calling it? Okay, give me the first one, and yes, if you'd be so kind as to turn on your mic, whoever's speaking,
I'm
that
gonna
would
let
be
the
great.
people speak that put them forth, so.
So what's the label for your first one?
It's transportation.
Okay? And please forgive everybody any typos. I'm just trying to capture the essence of the ideas. I'll fix that stuff afterwards. But if you don't feel that I'm capturing the essence of it, let me know, because it won't be verbatim. So what is it?
So on the transportation side of things, in some of our previous NEDAC meetings, we talked about being able to look at transportation, not just flowing from a commuter base from here down to urban Toronto, but coming the other way, or being able to import workforce into Newmarket. Because a lot of people, younger generation, do not actually own cars, nor do they want to for sometimes environmental reasons this is something that we had been talking about in our meetings separately. And where is it at is at the moment currently, it's, as we all know, it's very difficult. It's easy to get from Newmarket to Toronto, but it's difficult to come back the other way.
But also you have,
Yes.
also the different companies within the town have set up their own alternative transportation solutions.
Yes.
And maybe they can coordinate.
Yes, it's possible. So I just mentioned that we're bringing up, we have a large workforce that is community-based between here and Barrie, but we're still running shuttles in the morning, 3 to 4 shuttles every day to bring workforce into Newmarket. And if they could get here, then, the benefit could be that then, which has happened, that they love Newmarket and then they buy homes and then they become residents. So this is all a very good thing.
And so it matters because it's, that last point about could bring new investment, new
Exactly.
residents to the
New homeowners,
town.
new residents. Keep the money that they're actually earning here, being paid by a Newmarket company, to actually stay within the community for off-hour spending.
But it also increases your access to the talent pools as well.
Absolutely.
Let me capture that. So increases access to talent. Thank you. Everybody clear on what that one is? I mean, my one question for you is, what are you imagining? I don't want to get too much into the actions, but just give us a sample of what you imagine could be done from an economic development strategy perspective to further what you're talking about. What did you discuss at your tables?
We discussed a little bit about how can we support the other groups within the GTA that are working on the transportation systems, like Metrolinx and that, with our planning departments and other initiatives to maybe have the available land for, like you said, was the second GO train station on Mulock. How can we work together as a town with all those other partners?
I'm actually doing a Metrolinx workshop tomorrow.
Bring it.
In and around.
Yes,
those
we want to
issues.
hear about
Bring
it.
it.
Yeah, no, we're on camera. Okay, what's the next one? You said you had a second one?
Go ahead, Jim.
What's the label?
It was around advanced manufacturing, and when we look at the potential risk of, say, losing great jobs like Magna and things of that sort, how do we future-proof ourselves by investing in advanced manufacturing opportunities to keep those types of great jobs? Just as we talked about how we could be more collaborative, even from an N6 perspective, to say if we can even keep those types of businesses in the N6 geography, it still probably will mean great benefits to Newmarket. And when I think of some of the complementary businesses such as Celestica, that the advanced manufacturing opportunity and advanced testing opportunity could really create great synergy.
I think I missed, Jag, a few of the why it matters, so it could create great synergies, but give me a few of those other ones again.
Got a great memory, but it's really
Yeah.
short. It could create, sorry.
So we wrote,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
had to keep existing jobs, create better paying jobs, attract higher talent, tech talent. Had something else.
If I can jump in.
No, that's great.
Well, yeah, just to jump in a bit, one of the things we spoke about too is that Newmarket, we're only 14 square miles. And it's kind of like, yes, if you attract these manufacturing jobs, and manufacturing generally takes more square footage than office administration, things like that, where would you put it? And that's another reason why to work much closer with our N6 partners, that, that they might have, like along the highway going north, it's perfect opportunities for development because manufacturers want to be close to highways. Plus, we're looking at a link between the 404 and the 400. Once again, those are great opportunities for manufacturing that generally takes more square footage. It benefits our N6 partners. We don't really have a place to put a lot of this, but it also benefits Newmarket residents. And we can do some types of development that perhaps are premature for our N6 partners. We're better suited for $75,000, 75,000 square foot office space than Sutton. Things like that. So it's to work more collaboratively with them, looking at what are our strengths, what are our partners' strengths, and as I said, and what are the challenges of each. And one of our challenges is being 14 square miles. And one of the challenges of Sutton is that they really are far away. The infrastructure doesn't quite stretch that far, but it's still great for Sutton residents. So for our economic development departments to pay a little bit less attention to those lines on the maps and look at it more as a cluster.
That's it for us.
Okay, but where is that at? That's my last question. Has anything started, or is this just an idea at the moment? Chris?
Over the last 7 or 8 years, the Northern Six CEOs have been meeting. They have not met probably maybe 2-3 years. Kind of lost steam. So N6 EDO.
Oh, EDO, sorry.
CEOs.
You promoted
Yeah. Happy to help, Chris.
Just to be clear, the CEOs meet monthly.
Okay.
So they gotta get. So you meet every quarter or every month?
No, our frequency has actually increased, so we're probably bordering on monthly at this point in time, and sometimes more frequently than that, just because with the new council term and a lot of turnover from new CAOs and a couple of new mayors, we're trying to get a lot more momentum there.
Great. So those are two. Thank you for kicking us off at that table. Was that it? Okay. So why don't I just arbitrarily go over to the back table on the left? What's the label, first of all, for whatever you came up with?
Well, it's interesting because it's very similar to what Tom was just saying. So our label is collaboration with the N6. And what is it is basically linkages with N6 to improve housing, potentially post-secondary institutions, providing talent pool. And where is it at? I'm just gonna do one bullet because I think the other team has handled it quite
Okay.
well. So the second bullet, where is it all at? I think right now we all talked about, and Chris pointed this out as well, there's a lack of a good talent pool, and there's a lack of land to build in terms of manufacturing as well as other industry. Why does it matter? Because we, in order to grow and have our businesses grow, require resources, whether that be talent, land, broadband, and I think it matters because it could be a win-win for the communities, for the N6.
Did I miss anything? I was trying to keep up there.
It's perfect because it's more or less similar to what the other team already said.
Okay. Any questions from anybody about that one?
And just one quick comment, and I think that is there would be some communities adjacent to us that would be more likely to benefit from, for example, if we were to do a manufacturing proposal or work collaboratively with them. So East Gwillimbury to the north and Aurora to the south. It's harder, obviously, for the communities that are a little bit further away, but it shouldn't stop us from exploring them.
Great, thank you. Any others at that table? Okay, why don't we keep working around this way?
Can I just, I think, just briefly, not that I think all the points are relevant, but when we're talking about need resources to grow, I think we also had the comment about you need the resources to retain as well. So this is as much about keeping what's already here as much as it is about growing as well.
I'll add that in, thank you. So keep what's already here. Thank you. Okay, so who's up at this table?
Maybe I will say,
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, thanks, Merrick. What's the label?
well, the label would be speed up intensification of areas which were already designated for that. Basically, what we have is secondary plan amendment. We have zoning in place for major expansion in Yonge and Davis area, north on Yonge and south on Yonge, and east from Yonge on Davis. So we should capitalize on it, and this will allow us to accomplish other things, like we can, by creating more density, we can reduce traffic in certain things because people will be closer to where they work and live. We have Upper Canada Mall across the street, which is planning to do a major redevelopment. We also provide more of an urban type of lifestyle, which is very attractive for millennials, which is something that would be very attractive to people in high-tech industry who actually like the more urban settings. And the fact is that we already have a very, very significant part, the difficult part done, which is the zonings in this area, after all these discussions.
And so the what is it is get to it. Like
Get to it
moving.
and speed up as much as possible.
Okay. Any questions about that? Increase? Yeah.
The decision-making has been done. I think the issue is now it's the town that should market this spot to outside developers who say, look, we have a very major part of the obstacles that usually face the developers, which is the planning, behind us.
Okay.
And we have the growing population, we have demand, I think. Come and build.
Anything else from this table? Yes.
Just quickly add on that, though, I think it's important to say, I mean, I like what you're saying, but I'm sure Chris is thinking about saying it too, but we have the marketing corridors work that's gone on and brand, and we pushed it out to certain areas. On top of that, the senior staff, myself, the previous mayor, we've been meeting with virtually every major property owner on the corridors, talking about what can move them quicker, how we can, support them in what they're looking at. And so, is there more that we can do? Absolutely. We need to be more creative in how we reach out, brand, package this. But I will also say this, from my experience of talking to people, even in the last 12 months, but certainly the last 3 years, is I think everybody's going to be somewhat surprised in the coming 2 to 4 years about how much does materialize out of that. So once you do the secondary planning, the zoning, it takes a few years for it to act. It doesn't happen the next year, but a lot of work has been done, and the people that are coming and talking to us about what they want to do on their sites is so many multiples that, I think, now, they're not all going to happen at once, but I think there's a lot going on there. So I think part of the question might be about taking that and sort of asking, challenging ourselves, are there other ways we can package this, market this, promote it, and work in partnerships? But there's some interesting stuff that has been going on, and it's, I believe, moving forward.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep up. Edmund, you please.
So on that note, what John was saying, I think we need a marketing strategy, including branding.
In support of this?
In support of, sorry, as a different.
A
as a
new
different
initiative. Okay, let me go down to a new
So
one then.
The reason
So
is.
we'll call this did you say a marketing and
Marketing
branding
and
initiative?
branding.
Thank you.
The reason is whatever we've decided to do, or whatever we will decide to do in terms of focusing, we need to talk about it. We need to promote it. Today, I actually did some search just on Google as to how many people actually search the keyword new market. It came up anywhere from 44 to 82 per month only, and that's a challenge. So I actually did some other research on it on social media as to sentiment. The only thing that I can find relevant was TripAdvisor. On the top 8 TripAdvisor items, from Fairy Lake to Magna to Market Brewing Company, rating were very high, usually 4.5, but the number of reviews were only 760 in total. So think about this. If I want to relocate and I search, new market is not coming up. So we need to do something to make that happen. So if we don't think about this now, we can have envy, we can have other really good built-up resources, transformation. We won't have the money allocated to promote it. Nor they can find it, right? Yeah.
So Edmund, have I fairly captured, so what is it? It's promoting whatever it is we decide to focus on in the economic development strategy. It's having a greater online and social media presence. It's getting the word out, basically.
Digital marketing,
Yeah.
even paid advertising from a digital standpoint, keyword search, search engine optimization.
So you're saying that this is a well-kept secret?
Probably too much of a well-kept secret.
So I'll just finish this one with get the word out, so we're all clear. So where is it at? Do you have a marketing and branding initiative in place now, or was this something we would need to create? I'm looking around.
Yeah, so there's an existing economic development brand that focuses directly on marketing the corridors. So that exists, and as the mayor has said, part of that is that senior staff are meeting with people. Part of that is having a brand and a presence on social media. Part of that is more recently, now that we have the new zoning bylaw passed, doing some paid ads directly to developers where they get their information. So whether that's, to Edmund's point, an expansion of that economic development brand or something wider from a community perspective is probably worth looking into.
Okay.
Do you ever take some of your strategic plan and integrate that into your campaign? Like just like as you're building this, like because some of the fundamentals of what you're trying to grow, and then that's what you want. So could you market that? Like I just wonder if that is like a theme that could somehow be utilized within it. I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, I think there's lots of room in the brand to expand it. It's kind of based on this idea that we've all talked about, because NEDAC was part of that at an earlier point around there is a place for you here. And so any of the things that we're talking about as strategies could for sure fit underneath that somehow, and be used as leverage for
And I
marketing.
think that brings up an interesting point in that digital space of how to like, is there a consultant or I don't know in terms of innovation that you're working with from a digital perspective? I don't understand it at all, so that's where our struggles in our business. But is there someone that's kind of looking at that digital space and how we're positioned?
So we're at a point now where we're going to review our strategy as of now, fall. We've done certain things. We still have a media relations firm doing some work down there, but we recognize that we need to do more in the social media space to attract young people, businesses. And Newmarket, if you ask somebody in downtown Toronto about Newmarket, there's no image of Newmarket, good or bad. So we need to change that.
So
what I was going to say. I recently moved one of my employees from Scarborough up here, and one of the first things, like, if it's for why does it matter, be awareness, mostly, building awareness. Because you can put all the shiny buildings in, you can put all, like, the cool new businesses in, but if nobody knows Newmarket's on the map and there's nothing enticing them, because no one's going after them to entice them, no one's coming. Right? So I think awareness is the biggest part of branding, because there are so many times I've had awesome clients from all over the world come to Main Street and think, this is here? This is so awesome. Like, I had no idea. And this is only 45 minutes from, like, what? So people who even live 40 minutes from Newmarket right now don't even know Newmarket's here. So branding is huge because it's global, and the reach that we have now with the tools is massive, massively expansive. So
Peter, are you okay with some of the words I put up there? You know, helping to define the value proposition, awareness building, vesting Newmarket with meaning for people?
it's using the networks that we have to sell what we're all trying to do here for the town. Because
I'm going to add that back into the what is it. So use the networks to sell the town. Thank you.
Yeah, because we can build everything and make it super pretty, but if no one sees it, and we're not using also networks that are popular with millennials and the people who are actually using the internet and capitalizing on its resources,
great.
Then, I mean, in my opinion, I'm not trying to advertise to baby boomers at this point, because my dad's a baby boomer. He's set in his ways. He's moving on.
You've written them off.
It's that. It's people. Yeah, I love them to death. But it's people like me. It's people that, like, I'm trying to employ. It's people that, like, Newmarket's cool, and the businesses are cool, and the people are cool, and there's so much potential. And you know, Toronto, there's more than just the big city downtown. So
great.
I think, yeah, branding and initiative and awareness is everything.
So we had two, thank you. We had two from this table. Can I move to the next one? Is that okay? Okay, so last but not least, what did you folks come up with? Is there one or two, or how many? And again, if you could use the mic, that would be great.
Okay.
What's the label?
We want to be cool.
Is that the label? Be cool?
No, we talk about incubators though, so let's, for that purpose, so let's call it incubator.
Okay.
That's the way. And
What is it?
what is it is potentially taking funky spaces that may be on Main Street, maybe, and we were talking about, you know, different spots that maybe morph into whatever degree within buildings, because that's what I've seen in other places and done in other places. And as long as you do market it well, but actually another way of getting that kind of millennial business here is to have millennial businesses here and tell their friends, and more of them come and more of them come. It may take a little bit of incentive at the front end to give them all the resources they need, so to start it, and then once the vibe starts and you give the resources around it, it builds. It can build. And so one of the things we said was that, well, while the fire hall is waiting to be sold or something else, maybe if the town has the rights to it, maybe you can kind of go in there first and you know, wire it up and then get people in and start doing things, right? It's not, it doesn't require any real fit up, because people don't want that. The ones that I've seen, they want to come in and throw up a table and get together. We also talked about potential, like say the young mother community that are on maternity leave, and they also are looking at communities that can be built from there. And if you could put a space where people can come together, or call a play where everybody comes together in more often. It's the idea of people retain different groups of people that want to be here. We were first starting to talk about millennials, but we also then said there are other groups here that once that vibe starts, it can grow, and it can grow economically. And otherwise, people I know will head south, right, to do the same thing. If they're getting the, you know, the space they get, they can go downtown and use that space and get the kind of needs they have of that socialization stuff, and get ideas shared and all the good things that your young business needs.
May I piggyback on that? 'Cause, so we already had two, so I didn't do the third. The third was identical.
Oh.
So the only thing I want to say is that part of what way I was framing it too was create this, not, because I'm thinking spaces, and there's other space opportunities. I mean, and whichever ones emerge would emerge over time, but there's potential Mulock Farm, there's where the fire training is, that we could have our own evergreen brickworks. down at the old Fire Training Center. A lot of potential there, but I think it needs to be framed almost as a pre-business startup supporter ecosystem. So it's not just spaces, but it's programming, it's mentorship, it's all of that. And if you create it into a strategy that is about providing those kinds of spaces where ideas can come together and where people can if you take New Make It alone on its own, it's really that, but hitting other niches. It's niches making things, but there's other ones, you know.
Mayor Taylor, I want to capture that phrase. It was great. What did you say? A pre-business startup?
Pre-business / startup ecosystem.
Ecosystem, that's the word I
That's
missed.
spaces, programming, mentorships, all that kind of stuff. And I keep thinking to myself, and I don't know the numbers, but there's got to be a number out there somewhere that if, you know, for every 1,000 people in a town, if one attempts to start something entrepreneurial business-like, but only 2 out of 10 succeed, if you can create the spaces, the ecosystems where ideas can collide, and you can get yourself from, you know, only 5 per year succeeding up to 25 based upon the numbers starting and trying, because you provided that space and atmosphere and supports. I think you can just start to see that, you know, and so the whole thing, do you go for direct investment and try to spend energy and time landing one business with 22 employees or 62 employees, or do you grow all these business opportunities and ideas and energy that's local and that's there, and they're trying and sometimes failing because they don't have cheap space, they don't have people beside them sharing ideas, they don't have supports or mentors. So all that.
One of the byproducts is that you get that community built from, you know, Peter was talking about as well, but you actually, if you do it and you can create that kind of hub for people to kind of get together, then more people, the culture starts to build. It isn't, once they get here, they can see the main street and say, oh, I've got nice restaurants and it's interesting, but we also have a hangout where people are actually running businesses and can get mentoring help and that kind of thing is also there. And I bet you people like Venture Lab would balk at you doing it, maybe even help you, but it maybe supports it.
I think it's also important to add that we call it the funkiness of not just the incubator site, but the surrounding area is very important, because the younger generation does want to have, you know, a beer after, you know, microbrewery type of uniqueness to it, or they want to walk over for an experience at the same time. So it cannot be a secluded area. It has to be the whole environment that needs to be added onto that.
So yeah, and I think we keep it only on our radar for now, but in that umbrella, in that area, and I've been on my radar for a while, is this, in about 2 years, the Training Center for Fire will leave. And so for anybody who doesn't know, where is it? Timothy, when you go down, Timothy east off of Main, the dead ends at the fairgrounds, there's about, and I'm ballparking significantly, but I'm thinking a 3 to 5 acre site there that has huge potential. There's some existing buildings, but it's floodplain. There's it's already where New Make It exists, and it's a 3-minute walk to Main Street. So, I mean, in terms of even that on its own, however it was done, has quite a bit of potential to, if used for economic development purposes, or as themes to advance this kind of theme.
So I look at things like it's an event space, it can be meeting rooms. So it's definitely a place where people can like create ideas. But I think, yeah, it has to be like I think it has to be more than that, especially in a community our size. So I just thought that was an important point when it was multiple.
We also said hackathons and things like that, where you bring a bunch together, or even, you know, the robot building group and whatever, they're all over the place, but if you say, okay, we'll do it here, they'll run in and they'll invade for a day, and then they go away, but they now discover.
So let me play this back quickly, because the ideas and words were coming fast and furious, and tell me if we feel like we've got enough to capture the idea, or whether you want me to change or add anything. So what is it? Taking funky spaces that may be orphaned to some degree and creating incubator spaces. The town could wire and set the space up. We could create an evergreen brickworks-like space, or spaces, plural. It would have programming, mentorship, what the mayor said, put very well, pre-business startup ecosystem, spaces, programs, incentives, a place where ideas collide, multi-purpose and flexible. And then what I heard you say in terms of why does it matter, it could attract young and other talent, meets the needs of specific groups like young mothers, retains people who are already here, fosters idea sharing, socialization, mentoring and assistance, helps create a modern and positive vibe and culture for Newmarket, contributes to the funkiness of the broader community and the surrounding environment, not just the building itself. Have I missed anything critical, or do we have a good sense of that? Because my next question is, where is it at? The mayor has said there's a number of sites that have potential for this, but have we done, is anything happening yet in this area, or is it still just the kernel of an idea?
You make it
Yeah.
is a first good example, and also creative stuff like.
If I may ask a question, John, I have a question because there's one white elephant we've had in town, which is called the Tannery, okay? This is a place, walking distance to Main Street, right at the railway station. Is there anything happening there? This is a place which I think would be an extremely good location. And I'm telling you this because I have a friend who, in Italy, an Italian fellow has gone to the Italian railway network over the last few years and picked up a whole bunch of spaces at the railway stations, which were emptied because of computerization, and he runs language schools in many railway stations. He has hotels, 30, 40 room hotels in these railway stations. You know, and we have space there which is almost empty.
Yeah, the only thing I say there is, I mean, it is obviously privately held, and they're managing with office, et cetera, but I think their interest there is longer term, and to put it in perspective, the group that owns it is called the Sterling Caramar, or Sterling Silver, and they're the same people who built the Maryland Monroe Towers, for example. So they're not clear on their timeline, their plans, but I think you can rest assured that they plan to do more at some point, and they have pretty concrete plans that would probably preclude us from doing this kind of thinking there, I would suspect. Maybe on a shorter term you could, but there, you know, I don't know if anybody has anything, but I think that's pretty much the lay of land on that one. No? That's right.
So let me thank you. Oh, sorry, did you want to get in, Councilor? Yep, we'll get you one of those.
Just thinking about spaces, I have to leave Swope here during think tank, so I just wanted to run to get it because it's really on my heart, is the mall. We have this mall that we're trying to get people to go to, and that market company that is so fabulous, so amazing, and I said to Brand, it's a little bit early for its time. I see residential being built on the mall, creating these hub spaces, creating that community. We have that hub and that center that we can build onto, and so the new library or whatever on. I just really feel like that's such a missed opportunity of thinking about Airbnb or living spaces and, you know, bringing people into that community and using the center that we have.
Great, I'll just make a note there, thank you. So thank you all for generating those ideas. Have we captured the key additional strategies? Because what I'll do over your dinner break is I'll just put them all on a single page so that you'll be able to remember them when you're having your discussions afterwards. But I wanted to do one more thing, if you'll indulge me, before we break for dinner, and we can do this as a quick plenary exercise. I mentioned earlier that we need to think about the assessment criteria. So how do we decide whether one idea or strategy is better than another idea? Ultimately, staff and others have got to apply some good intelligence to this and say, does this meet these criteria? Does this one meet it or not? And so then the criteria are quite important. So just to start us off, and I put these up, feel free to ask me to delete them. It's easily done. But I wanted to give you a sense of some starting ones and have you in plenary just yell out some additional. So one of the things I think you need to be thinking about is town or community sphere of control. It's great to identify strategies, but if it's completely outside of your control or sphere of influence, you've got probably a tough row to hoe. Secondly, you got to think about cost, right? There's not unlimited resources, but it's not just cost, it's the value for the money. You might want to spend a lot on something that's going to deliver something or has the potential to deliver something great. I think you want to be thinking about the type and number of people and businesses that would benefit. So does the strategy only help a narrow segment within Newmarket? And that might be okay, but you want to be thinking at least about that issue, or do you want something that's going to be more broadly based and beneficial? I think clearly, I say this on behalf of the councillors in the room, you want to look at alignment with council priorities. Is what we're doing actually dovetailing with what council has already identified as part of their broader agenda for the town? And as Chris has already said, you'll want to be thinking about alignment with what York Region is doing in some of their economic development directions and strategies. I could have put 20 up, but I didn't want to do all the work for you. That's just to get you thinking. What are some additional key criteria? We're not running anything through the criteria now, we're just identifying the criteria. Just kind of, if you would grab the mic as you yell them out so that folks who are listening to the live cast can hear, I'll just key them in. So in a sentence or less, as I've done up there, what are some additional criteria you want to put on the table? Start back there.
Can it be executed within a reasonable time frame?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, timeliness is very important. So in a I can't spell, reasonable time frame. Thank you. Keep them coming. Again, use the mics if you would, please. Anything else? There's got to be more.
I don't know what the right phrase is, but I wonder, is this something like resident satisfaction or quality of life or something like that, which could be, you know, for example, we could say something like, well, what would fit all this is if we put a great big honking power plant over there, but the community really doesn't want a great big power plant, so that's the kind of.
Yeah, is that a fair way to say it? Contribution to resident satisfaction and quality of not lie, of life? Okay, great. Who else? Yes, please.
Maybe along that line is make sure it has an environmental focus, that we're doing something that's going to continue the work that the town has done, maintaining green space and being complementary to what we've built here.
Great, thanks, Donna. Who else? Yes, Councillor.
Future-proofing and sustainability, but not just from the green space or environment, but more from, are we investing in the demographics or the generation that we want to make sure will take this further?
Did I see somebody over here? Edmund.
Yeah, the impact on other strategies.
And can you give me a few examples? Which other kinds are you thinking of?
So I'm thinking about effectiveness.
Are there any specific types of strategies, like transportation strategy?
Oh,
or
I'm thinking, how far-reaching is that strategy?
Okay.
How effective is that going to be? Is that going to impact or help us with our other initiatives? Synergy.
Thank you. Let me capture helping with other initiatives. Anyone else? Anything not on that list? Yes.
We got jobs.
Oh,
Jobs.
jobs. That was one of them that I was going to put out. I thought, no, I'll let that come up. So contribution to jobs.
Yeah, I mean, also, again, we're measuring, we're imagining the potential. This is the criteria now, not for measuring by action. Yeah, and assessment, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I saw somebody in the back.
Resources. So does the town or whoever, do we have the resources in order to implement whatever strategy we decide on?
I would like to add, we already mentioned sustainability, but I would say financial sustainability, which what I mean by that is that if you do a project, we don't want it to be a burden for future generations for the town. It should somehow have some kind of ROI component. Sometimes there's very little ROI, but there should be some kind of a thought about that when you plan any projects.
Any others before we take a break for dinner? Okay, I'll just really quickly recap. So there's all the ones I mentioned, and now we've added, can it be executed in a reasonable time frame, or is it going to take 1,000 years? Contribution to resident satisfaction and quality of life, or at least not making things worse for people, like bringing a cement plant in. Degree to which it contributes, not that I'm against cement plants for anybody who's watching at home, degree to which it contributes to the environment, green space, etc. Future proofing and sustainability, so investing in something that next generation may want to take further, will be comfortable with. Impact on other strategies and the broad effectiveness, as Edmund's described it. Contribution to jobs and growing the employment in the area. Resources, do we have sufficient resources to implement whatever it is we're thinking of doing? Financial sustainability, so it's not a burden for future generations, and ensuring that whatever we do, we've done the business case for it to ensure that there's going to be a reasonable return on investment. Anything else?
We'll see your
Have you got the mic?
sorry, my apologies.
No problem.
Your target market audience. So does the criteria, are we measuring which, what our audience is? I'm not saying it correctly.
No, but let's tease it out. So are we saying, is the initiative meeting the needs of our target audiences, or is it more than that? Or?
No, like we talk about financial investments, we're gonna,
Yeah.
do we have the resources? Return on an investment, well, yes, but you could be targeting baby boomers when we should be, when there's another project that we could be investing in for the same amount of money, but we are targeting millennials or next generation that will help have longer term dollars coming back.
So others jump in. Donna, let's find it.
Similar to the impact of other strategies, right? You're just expanding on that.
Ensure appropriate targets.
Sure, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, initially, I asked the question, have we identified our, the target market? I think I was kind of on the same lines. Later in this discussion, I realized that the target audience potentially is talent.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And so I know that's a broad brush, but I think it is
Sure,
talent.
because age isn't, I'm not discussing specifically
Right.
age.
Yeah. Yeah, but I agree. I think there should be a very sheer focus on what that market that we're trying to attract is.
So I've added talent attraction and retention. May I, and I'm the facilitator, I'm here to be an instrument for the group. But I was hearing you say something a little bit more, and I'd like to try this out on you. It's not just ensuring the appropriate target markets, it's looking at the opportunity cost of going with one over another. Because may I add that with your permission?
Please, yeah. Okay.
Okay, this is a good list. Anyone else, anything before we break for dinner? Yes, Jag.
Just a thought on how are we differentiating? If we're always trying to mimic or trying to compete, larger municipalities will always have deeper pockets and things of that sort. Newmarket has, in the back of my mind, spins the idea of, big enough to be that great urban environment, small enough to give you a great small town feel. And the idea of making sure that we are speaking to the great benefits of Newmarket, not necessarily trying to compete with municipalities that'll just throw money at things that we're not necessarily always able to do. We've got a very different value proposition, and you've already hit it there, but a value proposition that I think makes Newmarket incredibly unique.
Great, excellent point. Last call, one more, yep, Peter?
It's kind of an oddball, but I kind of like the idea of ensuring that Newmarket creates its own voice for itself. Kind of got me thinking on that topic. Newmarket doesn't need to prove anything. We just need to ensure that it speaks for itself, creates its own voice, and it doesn't need to be what other towns or other cities are. Just it's its own thing.
Great, thank you.
Keeping that in mind.
Anyone else? Okay, excellent beginning to the meeting, everybody. I'm going to now look, Chris, dinner I think is just across the hall in the Mulock room, and if you wouldn't mind, you can pick it up there and then come back in here. I know the agenda's been switched around. We were gonna start at 4, then it was 4:30, then we started late because of the live streaming. Can I respectfully, if this is okay with everybody, ask that we kind of grab dinner and be ready to go in about 20 minutes? Is that fair, to try to get you out of here on time? So by that clock, it's what, about 20, okay, why don't we say by that clock we'll reconvene at 6:45. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, thanks everybody. get to it. So first of all, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. That's always encouraging. I know again that some of you had a late night last night. Chris was telling me that I know some of you originally, the agenda was scheduled to go from 4 to 8. Some of you may have to leave at 8 or we're planning to leave at 8. So we're gonna do our best, even though we didn't start until 4:40, to try to get you out of here by 8. But that means I need us all to kind of go into rapid response mode to really kind of keep things moving along here, which might be a good spirit for the rest of the meeting anyway. So now we come to the Dragon's Den. And just to give this again a bit of structure, what I've done is created, and I will hand these out to the recorder at each table. And we've got a staff person at each of the tables who will fill this in for you. You've also got the flip chart if you want to draw stuff in front of each other, but this is the key document I'm going to be collecting afterwards. So the staff person who's doing the recording at each table, Jason's coming back, right? Is he? No? Oh, so who do we have at that table then, Chris? Oh. So whoever steps in to play that role, I'll ask you again to please write or print as legibly as possible. But secondly, make sure that you write down enough so that somebody who was not at your table will actually know what was talked about. Like so many times I collect sheets like this and somebody will write down expansive. And I'll look at that and Chris will look at that and will say, what does expansive mean? And yet in your discussion, there was probably a great 3-minute discussion around what expansive meant. So make sure that you write down enough that somebody who wasn't at your table or wasn't in your heads will actually be able to understand it. Try to minimize the number of acronyms that are used, and again, try to flesh things out. But you're going to be limited, and I've purposefully done this by the amount of space that you have, because I want to challenge you to be succinct and focused and not just kind of ramble on, if I can put it that way. And I mean that in the best sense of that instruction. So what are the questions? The first one is going to be, what do you believe should be the core economic development strategy objectives? So what is it that you actually think we are trying to achieve with this strategy? Is it more jobs? Is it being able to bring more people in and out of Newmarket more easily? Is it about benefiting the businesses that are here now? What are the real core objectives that you think this strategy should be in support of? That will help to set you up for the next couple of questions, and I'm going to put this down so I can hold this up for you. And we've purposely used a table that is constrained in size. On the left side, and there are only a total of 5 boxes, we're looking for your top 5 game-changing economic development strategy initiatives. Now, some of you came up to me on the break, and I share your view on this. Some of the things that were identified here in these 6 are more tactics than they are whole strategies. So I'm not going to today worry too much about that, but I'm going to ask you in the crucible of your conversations as you compromise and negotiate to think through, are these really initiatives or tactics or strategies? Maybe some of these are in support of bigger strategies such as the one Chris identified. So I'll leave that up to you. There are 5 boxes. You'll put your top 5 strategies, 1 in each of the boxes, and on the other side, right across from it, we're asking you to write down what role can or should NEDAC play in furthering whatever the game-changing strategy is. So there's really only 3 questions. What are the big objectives that you think the economic development strategy should be about? What are your top 5 game-changing economic development strategies? And for each of those, what role can NEDAC play? And then there's a last page, should you want to add any additional other comments. So is everybody clear on what you're doing? When you're finished, and I'm going to try to say this will be a 30-minute or so, 35-minute exercise, but I'll check in with you. You'll then stand and in very succinct presentations, like 3 minutes each, deliver the outcomes of this document, and then your peers will respond. Chris has already walked around a copy of the presentation he gave, so you've got those initiatives. I've put the 6 titles of the ones you identified earlier. If anybody wants me to scroll back to the tables so that you remember more what they were about, I'm happy to do that. So are we ready to go? Are there any questions? That table, are you providing that to us?
That's my question. Are we working off of that?
Yeah, I'm gonna give this table to each of your tables, so to speak. I've got a copy for each of you, and I'm gonna give it to the staff person who will serve as your quasi-table facilitator, note taker. Okay? We're good to go? So Chris, you're gonna be one of those. And over here to Elizabeth. Oh, you?
No, I'm just.
Yeah, I thought you were thinking
Yeah, exactly. I was the guy that could tell the one-line jokes. And you're right. There we go.
Smart people, and you will want to jam stuff together and say, oh, he's only let us pick 5, so I'll put 3 of them together. Don't do that. Make sure they are 5 distinct, real strategies. Okay, go to it. assessment criteria we came up with as you think about your game change, right? Is it doable, timelines, sphere of influence?
Go do it.
say you wanted to,
Yeah, right now
to
you
go
have
with
4.
supporting wealth creating company, or, yeah, supporting wealth creating companies, which is one of the things Chris talked about. You can just put that label in off the slide, or just put in, you know, marketing and branding strategy. You don't have to rewrite everything that's on the slide if that's your strategy. But if you want to tweak it somehow, do make that notation. So again, we'll target about another 15 minutes. Thanks.
So on this grid, what else?
I still would say, I think that, there's a discussion about, whatever you call it, but, yeah, I don't, well, it's fine, but it's just part of a bigger sense of like, a job, a startup. I like, yeah, you know, startup or big business. Because then it's more than just a store, it's a strategy, it's programming, it's making multiple spaces. That was great. It's creating a strategy. It's creating a strategy. That's like take us to that very first stage of business, like eBay, where sometimes it's just something I want to start a startup. Company, but we're not getting more of them. One way to have some skills.
Make that part of your morning coffee, please.
It'll be done. Because business startup equals.
Right. And strategy. Imagine you talk about branding and just decide to introduce yourself and skills and ready to differentiate. You just say, you know, we're a great place, you know, bring your business here. But what about if, you know, that's what you start a business? If you're here in town or you're probably wasn't the best place to start a business from scratch because you know people in the sports, the synergies, the spaces, programs and mentors, we specialize in starting from scratch. Like, I'm not saying that should be a brand, I'm just saying that that's some concept.
So for, I just think
What are you saying about the all the time? These are all the
that's
we're using, we're using.
So hang on, so what is, are you
Think about that.
what is that? No, I think it's trying to push us. If you went back to the very first economic are you saying to be simply
Some of these
and new media, so you want exactly, that's the thing, shared YouTube. And then all of a sudden you've got people like you, we go, just have to do it all, begin to get you. What about all the self-organization, honestly, I think it's got like any bears. But if you, but if that big, just builds those people. What about these guys? Sure, that's like, these things are gonna be able to
let me tell you another story. When those two actual my daughter's friend from high school.
Not, okay.
Graduated years ago from that school. And she is mechanical and she has how long? Oh, since they were so, you know, she has to graduate American, you have to get it all. So she's now in a coaching They also have. They also really like everyone. Thought about it, you know, the production line. Even how electronic versus actually high tech, what actually might not see. So you're actually. So she but that's one of the pieces, and she's doing it now. Her husband has also, you know, always let contractor work for her. And so one of my things, we can also, if you have, like, I don't know at this point, this was something I think they did.
No, it is a very affordable way of marketing. It's a way of just,
Okay, everybody, if I could have your attention back up here, please. So first of all, just to let you know, the mics were muted if you happen to have left yours on. They were muted for the table discussions, but they'll be live now again once you press the button and it goes to green.
Thanks for telling us now about it.
Well, I was protecting you. We muted it. So what we're going to do now is invite each table to give us a quick sort of 3-4 minute overview of what what were some of those key economic development goals. So the first question, and then secondly, what were those top 4 or 5 strategies that you came up with? Don't worry so much tonight about the column to the right about what might NEDAC do. We can just pick that up off the sheets. I'm not going to key anything in because we'll collect the sheets that you've been writing on and we'll turn it into the part of the meeting summary and the notes. But we are, after each one, I'm going to invite you to provide feedback on what you've heard. And I'm going to give you sort of just 2 words to keep in mind, and that would be appreciatively critical. And what I mean by that is, what do you like about what the group has said? And secondly, is there anything giving you any heartburn? Have they come up with 5 strategies that you just find yourself shaking your head and saying, I don't know why you would have chosen that? So who wants to kick us off? Again, this part's going to be kind of just presentation. And I've just labeled, Chris is looking at me. Maybe would you like to go first? Sure. And then what I've done is just given the tables a name by the staff person who was there so that we can record the comments afterwards. So Chris, kick us off.
You want this, the objectives first?
Objectives first and then your strategies.
Okay, we came up with 4 objectives. Increasing wealth and employment, creating a great community.
Have you got your mic on?
Giving Chris a, no.
Chris a raise.
No, our objectives are to increase wealth and employment should be fundamental. Create a great community with outstanding citizen satisfaction. Smart city is a foundation of our growth to future-proofing the community. And by smart city, we mean creative initiatives that create efficiencies, generate revenue, or provide better customer service. And customer service, we mean customer service to the business community, not necessarily the residents. And finally, initiatives to the younger demographic, as well as what we currently do, which maybe will be more skewed towards the older demographic. So we need to start thinking high school, university, that age group in our efforts.
Sorry, point of clarification there. We said increasing wealth, we meant increasing incomes.
Okay.
And or his income, as the case might be.
So the game changers, are these in order? No. Not necessarily. No. Okay, so game changers, deferring DCs, we got to tie into what the region's doing. That's going to create the biggest bang for the buck to bring employment or bring people to the corridors who will be the labor force for our companies that need employment.
I saw somebody give me the sign there. If you didn't hear that, it was deferring DC's development charges.
And under marketing and branding, the second one, you don't need NEDAC's role, okay.
No, that's okay.
Marketing and branding, new approaches, new target markets, and new digital methods. We didn't explore it, but we recognize that we need to look and take a hard look at our target markets and new methods of marketing. Incubator, the whole discussion was held earlier as the third one, and it's really about creating jobs and for different groups, creating a social atmosphere, creating an environment for innovation in the community through an incubator or several incubators throughout the community. Another one, transportation, the second GO station is really a game changer to go along with all-day service as well, so we get that two-way traffic that would bring employees north much easier. We've heard from several people about how they're shuttling people in, which we weren't aware of. And the final one is simply we wrote down post-secondary. There needs to be some sort of post-secondary presence in Newmarket.
Okay, Thank you. Anything that anybody at that table wants to add to Chris's quick overview? Okay, so let me open it up to the group again. Rapid response, because we don't have a lot of time left in the meeting. Appreciative, constructive feedback on what you just heard. What was appealing to you? What maybe gave you a little bit of concern? Anybody? Tired? It all sounded great?
The only thing I'd say is I think, and I'm a huge fan, I was on the pulled up post-secondary, but I think that needs a lot of unpacking and thinking and maybe broadening the definition and understanding why, and if it's about, maybe it's about more learning opportunities or I don't know, but that, I think sometimes people hear that and they get stuck in the idea, unless you land a brand name, somewhere in your, then you somehow haven't succeeded. And I think you should think about what it is you're trying to achieve and then broaden the definition of what it means to have post-secondary / learning opportunities / I don't know.
So I'll push back on the fact that the question was, what would be a game changer? I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying the answer to the question, what is a game changer? And if people had the option to not leave the community, I'm not saying, because one of the things is being achievable, because I don't think that that's achievable, but to answer the question, that would be a game changer to not allow people to leave and attract. But I agree with what you're saying.
Okay, so let's make both of those points, what the mayor was saying, and then also this notion that it may not be achievable, though it might be very desirable. Anyone else on anything that we heard from this table?
I think just in response to the post-secondary, I think too, it could be, like we talked a little bit about being more, and someone listed like executive learning facilities. Like, I think it can be more than just what we see as a traditional university or college. And creating some really innovative, like we said, like a culinary school. Like things like that might be a way to think about it too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or connected to the hospital or whatever. There's lots of things.
So would it be fair if I said the post-sec could be focused on executive learning or niche-specific education, like a culinary school or whatever it might be?
Or health-related.
Or health-related?
What did you say? You said specialty?
He was niche-specific.
Yeah. Okay. Yes? Oh, you want to go next? Okay. Any other comments about this group, though, before we move on? Again, I know some of you've got to go at 8, so I'm going to keep things moving.
Yeah,
Mayor?
I'd like to ask a question. Why would you only say that being favorable to or client-centered to the business and not to the residents? I think this goes without saying that the town should be good for both.
Because our first objective was cut citizens. He went to the ones that were related to economic growth. But the first one we did say, citizen satisfaction was earlier.
I think both of our.
Yeah, we agree.
I'll make that note as well. I'll take all, thank you. Okay, if you don't mind then, can we go to JAG's group? We'll go around this way, sort of counterclockwise. So JAG, what were your key objectives at your table and what were your game changers?
Our first objective was to actually read the instructions and follow them because we deviate.
You're not alone in deviating.
So, but we went straight, we made a number of notes, but then we went straight to the chart and said, our first topic was tourism, and then we went to what can NEDAC do to support marketing campaign, educate on the interconnectivity of business and tourism. And there was a healthy discussion to say that the Newmarket has such great things to offer, yet it was Beth's example to say that she had colleagues in from, was it Los Angeles, and when they left, they took nothing that said Newmarket away with them, something as small as that.
Yeah, they asked me, where could they get something that has Newmarket on it? And the answer was nothing. I mean,
But the idea that, creating a little bit more memorable experience from a Newmarket perspective. And there was a feeling that as a campaign, it may be difficult. There was some discussion about the marketing may be a little bit difficult, but I think we do need to focus on how can we launch an effective marketing campaign, and maybe we need to think very much differently when we have gentlemen like Peter in the room where maybe it's not the traditional. How do we do it differently from a campaign perspective? The next was on jobs, and part of this I think overlapped with some of the comments that were made earlier, and identifying the gaps. Identifying the gaps, transportation, office space that meets the needs, incentives, and then track properties for reuse. And it all was part of once again, a lengthy discussion where we'll come back to Beth again to say, in some of her experience, she's changed her business model based on the fact that the talent pools that she needed didn't exist on the animation side of things. And so had there been a greater knowledge of those gaps, could we have done something in order to facilitate those talent pools or help with that in order to keep that dimension from a business perspective? And then even from an office space perspective and all, to say that she was struggling to say she could grow in Newmarket, but she didn't necessarily have the space that worked for her needs. And so how could we either create those opportunities or track properties that may help her fit her needs better? And I think that would be somewhat consistent for most businesses to say they may struggle to find exactly what fits what their needs are and how they would match them.
When we were talking about the funkiness and creative spaces and things like that, and we've been working with Chris and Elizabeth, and we haven't been able to solve. So it's one thing to say, let's have pool and incubators and that, but even if a company that's 40 employees can't actually find funky space, or, if there's brown space out there that can be converted, that kind of stuff.
The next was post-secondary, and it was less is more and start small. So similar to the alignment to the executive education, but even if it's not executive education, how do you get a relationship started where you can offer a program? If it's not the a whole school or a whole new campus, how do you create new space and new opportunity to allow for just programs to be delivered locally? And that could help once again with some of those talent pool gaps that could fit with different industries. Our next was South Lake and encouraging council to understand objectives and how we partner. But then we also went on to saying helping businesses to understand South Lake better and how they could complement and what they could do to offer greater services to such a large entity that we have, and different services that they could provide to help along with them. And our last one was marketing the corridors, but then we ran out of time.
Great. Thanks, Jag, for the overview. Anybody anything to add at that table? No? Okay, so let me open it up. Constructive, appreciative feedback again for that table. Anything causing you concern? Anything you really liked in terms of what you heard?
We talked a little bit about tourism here. So that one again, I challenge on. I think your point about what to take away and how can you use maybe some branding opportunities in that way. But tourism's a tricky thing for a town like Newmarket, and I've seen many towns go and try to build a whole strategy around tourism when they just didn't have the basis for tourism. And you've got to know what you are and what you're not. I think we maybe are a great spot for regional tourism, but I'm not sure we're pulling people in from New Orleans or Quebec to come and spend a weekend here in Newmarket. So maybe we can get there. I don't know. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I think we need to, if we're going to look at that seriously, we need to know what it is that we can achieve and what is a good strategy within that.
But to your point, that wasn't, I agree with you. I think we all agree with you. That isn't something that we were trying to explore. It was, how do we, as we were thinking more how from NEDAC, can we support council to achieve improvement in attracting people to Newmarket through tourism? So is it supporting York Region's objectives and how they do it as a region to identify, as simple as having something available for someone to, like you said, with Pride Week and Pride Month, all of downtown was well promoted. We could do something similar to promote the town by even having a week that's, sort of celebrating us and having our flag, having our T-shirts, having something there that could help promote, maybe not tourism per se, but just pride. A slogan that is a little bit catchy, something that will attract.
I shared the Smith Falls, I mean, not that it works, but Smith Falls, went from a chocolate factory to cannabis, and it's like, our town is dope, it's everywhere, in all the stores, and we bought a lot of those T-shirts when we were little teenagers.
Did you buy their main product?
Just the T-shirts.
Yeah. It's in our line items.
yes, please.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to also address the tourism part, because what I hear your table saying is, it's not the larger tourism, to John's point about New Orleans coming to Newmarket, it's more event driven. And I totally agree, like, we could do soup fests like they do in Holland Landing that, but I would also caution us about going for a full-blown tourism strategic design.
Yeah,
Because you need
we
tons of
crossed it
money.
with hotels, which
Yes.
is, I know, not the most interesting conversations, and we really understand the numbers. Thank you for that, and we really understand it, but it's just, it's so hurtful for business to not have proper hotel rooms. Like, this summer was crazy for me and cost the company and the town like at least $25,000 over a 2-month span, because I could not house the people that we needed to house here for our business. And that's why what we were saying is that business, tourism is actually connected to business, even though you think it's weekends and events and that kind of stuff. But if room nights and suitable room nights, and again, understand all the problems, but if suitable room nights were there for weddings and some of the bigger events that people would pay more for on the weekends, then those of us who need it for business during the week would fill it during the week.
And there was also a little bit of discussion of moving from the day trip opportunity in Newmarket to, can we evolve to an overnight, so a stay and play. So not necessarily a full-blown, but certainly can we inch towards being not just day trips and creating a stay and play opportunity.
Well, some good caution, some good discussion as well. Thank you. May we, with your permission, go to the next table? So Susan or whomever, who's your spokesperson?
It would be a joint role, because I think there should be sharing.
Collaborative spirit, I love it.
Yes. All right. So our core economic development strategic objectives are very similar to what Chris's group had come up with. So all along, resources, talent, retain and train, recruit talent. Second bullet was to attract and retain business, so similar to increasing wealth for the town of Newmarket. The last one was sort of, it's a fuzzy-wuzzy one. It's Newmarket is a great place to live and work, but it feeds into attracting talent, retaining businesses, etc.
You've got your mic on, right?
Yes.
Great, just checking.
All right. So the top 5 game changer. Over to Rod.
The collaboration. So the post-secondary co-op programs, training and placement, collaboration with others. I think, just some free thoughts on this. I can only imagine that, from a university perspective, college perspective, I'm, as a small business, being called all the time asking if I'll take interns or be open to these programs. And I assume, as a small business owner, that there's far more behind this maybe than what there is. I'm assuming that the city potentially or collectively there are quotas, agreements, funding measures to make this more palatable, so there's something in it for everyone. I can't go beyond assume. The opportunity, or call it the concept here, is to formalize potentially some of that, that gets us even outside of thinking just down the street. So, we used Kingston, we used other, brainstorming some ideas in creating almost a two-way quota, if you will, that or at least an expectation to hit a quota of X amount of, students coming from whatever university to be co-opt or whatever in Newmarket, and work with in reverse to make sure that everyone's happy as far as being able to commit to things like that. And frankly, that I won't blur the line here between talent, but once that talent is here, well, then we have other things that we can try to kick in to make sure that they want to stay, or at least consider what it means to live and grow within Newmarket. So call it maybe formal relationships with colleges, universities, even far, that want to be able to commit to proactively at the end of or nearing a term to place students, particularly for all the right reasons, in Newmarket. Oh, sorry, I was just passing around.
Did you want to read anything? You're good. All right. So number 2, thank you for the very abbreviated version. Much appreciated. Smart City Technology. Smart City and Technology is our second one. Marketing and brand strategy, which has come up before. We couldn't come up with a solution, but we came up with a problem. We want to define a differentiating feature for Newmarket. That's something that Peter brought up. So we want to distinguish Newmarket from others, because East Gwillimbury is sitting there with their own little economic development committee. They're thinking the same things we do. Kitchener-Waterloo is as well. So what can we use to differentiate? And lastly, a lot of people mentioned this, transportation. Key for a lot of things. Does anybody else want to add something from our team? We're done.
Thank you. So quick, again, constructive, appreciative feedback on what you've heard. Anything that you want to raise as an issue, anything that you want to point out as being particularly resonant or powerful?
I like that co-op.
Yeah?
Too. Well, and I think if you did it in a concerted way, you do it from a small business perspective, Rob, we could do it with the hospital, because there's tons of nursing co-ops, or they're not called that, but they come in for their internships as well as the docs and others. As an employer that large, I'm sure it's a big number. I mean, we just haven't added it up. And if there was an arrangement made, because there's specific schools that maybe, and if the town got behind it a little bit and did something for them on the side that kind of made them feel more at home.
You know, just anecdotally, even someone mentioned, and Chris, you had even referred to it as you weren't aware of it, that there are companies paying for transportation. Heck, let's get that understood so that we are aware, because there's just, without even funding, I mean, we should be capitalizing on that and tying it potentially, you know, to help with the transportation, which was our, call it, you know, game changer, but that in itself as well. So it's one thing to say we're aware of it. I think that if that is happening, I would, as a business, want to know that, because I have that problem, right?
And
From the South Lake perspective,
is your mic on?
sorry.
The mic, please.
Where do you see the opportunity for any sort of education or co-op with South Lake?
Well, just before I touch on that, one of the nuances we spoke about with the co-ops as well, we talk about partnerships with other universities or whatever it is, but we thought one of the other big things was, given that there isn't post-secondary in Newmarket, the kids from Newmarket, Aurora, East Gwillimbury, who go to university, live here, but you know, have gone away to university, so it can be, I know we get Laurier and others say, well, we have kids who want to do co-op, but they from Newmarket, they want to do their co-op in Newmarket, or they want to do it around there. So part of it is those people who, so they don't leave in the first, but yes, they leave for university, but if they did their co-ops, because, you know, the anecdote I gave, you know, when I was growing up, there was factories in my hometown, but everybody thought, you know, when I finished university, my job isn't in here, I'm going somewhere else, because you didn't know kind of what the opportunities were in your own hometown sometimes that were available. I think just with, you know, with something like the hospital, tons of potential, whether it's nursing, healthcare, human resources, IT, finance, you know, all those departments live there. I mean, the question comes up with co-ops, I think they're not free, and, you know, speaking specifically to the hospital, you know, there isn't the money necessarily to dedicate to, you know, 10, 15, 20 co-ops around the building, because those add up. So absent a deliberate strategy from the hospital saying we want to do a good thing for, you know, for the community or for future pipeline or whatever it is. A lot of these things can have the opportunities, but is there the money? Is there the time and energy to mentor and school these people every 6 months or whatever it is? So I think it's part of the strategy. The opportunities are there. Similar to, you know, Town of Newmarket. Town of Newmarket would be a big employer. The region of York would be a big employer in the area that would have similar kinds of opportunities.
I wasn't doing the new thing. We weren't spending any extra money. Yeah, I saw the pictures of all the nursing interns that came in. There was a big, nice picture of 30 of them. And I was just following on the point that that's one that exists, but the town didn't know about it, because we published it from the hospital. I saw it. It was very nice. But if you added all those opportunities up, you would actually see a millennial workforce that's here that may be larger than we think. And then the question is, and it's not a new dollars, but the only new dollars may be to help them feel welcome and then encourage them to tell their friends.
And so what I'm hearing, sorry, I was just saying.
No, but you're right though with the incubator, because wouldn't it be great if you could go to the incubator and there was a database that says, here's all the internship opportunities from all these different businesses within Newmarket, and then we, as as an employer, I can put that in there. So
What
it
I
all
was
feeds
thinking
itself.
What I really liked about this, when I heard it too, as soon as I heard it, I started thinking there's potential to be here. And I mean, it's sort of those ones, you want to think of this idea without worrying about how it might be difficult or what the barriers, the costs are. But if you take it in a way, it's answering the question about economic development, differentiator, and redefining post-secondary. I mean, if you became, just for the heck of it, you started, whether you could actually claim it or not, but you started embracing the brand, we're the co-op capital of Ontario. Right? And then all of a sudden you're seen for that and you're known for that. And it means all these young people that are starting their careers and their opportunities are coming here because we figured it out. We've got great supports and we've got great partnerships with Southlake and Children's Aid and the hospital and the region. And I mean, it's an interesting, it's just, at this point it's only an idea, but if you talk about all of those things and bringing them together, this has potential to kind of do it. I like it.
Great discussion. Anything else? I know we're down to our last 7-8 minutes. Okay, so let's go to our last table, last but not least. Elizabeth, who's our spokesperson? The mayor?
Okay, so in terms of the objectives, we basically said that growing and diversifying jobs in Newmarket is the objective. And really, when you boil it down, everything else is either a strategy or a tactic. I mean, for an economic development committee, I mean, even building an amazing community for an economic development committee is about growing and diversifying jobs.
Okay.
So you could have a lot more, but we just decided to stick with that, keep it focused. The economic development strategies was, and Merrick brought it up, but I'm glad it is because we've had it in our past iterations, and just livability, or a livable city. And so, how do you make support of public infrastructure, public transit, housing options, et cetera. So all that stuff that makes a great place, that attracts businesses, attract new residences, and makes people want to grow and stay and grow their businesses, et cetera. We put in, it was touched about client-centric or / ease of doing business. So is there work that could be done and needs to be done to make anything from starting a business to expanding the physical footprint of your business, or building some housing options? Is it as business friendly as it can be? And so, there's things that can be done to look at that and try to become one of those places that's known for having just really ease of doing business and very client-centered. As others have mentioned, but branding, marketing, a lot's been talked about that, about creating awareness or finding some way of, and new ways of all these table discussions about getting the brand out there and getting higher awareness and higher search results. And then the other one was that's been discussed a bit already too, but the entrepreneurship hub, or the pre-biz ecosystem, or whatever term we want to use, and the potential for that, not just spaces, but systems and programming and support and mentorship, and so kind of like maybe if you become known as or you could become known as the easiest or best place to start a business. Because of all the supports and all of the workspaces and all of the new make it spaces that can support what you're doing. And the one idea we had there that was just kind of like other interesting takeaway ideas that you maybe never thought of before, but is more getting into tactical strategies, but is just the idea of what about, when we were thinking with Peter McKinnon, we talked about a new make it. What about what's the newest version of that? What's a new media YouTube shared space and studio space look like? And what does that attract, and what does that do, and how could that be a new sort of the next frontier in kind of shared workspaces and incubation?
Excellent. Anything to add from this table? The mayor's covered it all. Thank you. So let me open it up. Any quick comments, reactions to what you've just heard? Again, constructively appreciative. Chris?
So in all 4 groups, I never heard anything. I heard once about the hospital. Is that because, and this is a question, is that because everybody thinks that we know that we're working as close as we can with the hospital, that we don't need to do more? So it's important, but it wasn't recognized as a game changer around the table here.
We actually talked about that, but I think it's assumed that we ought to do it regardless. So that's business as usual for us.
And is that the case for others? Is it, I'm just making a note here as part of our open forum, the work with the hospital is assumed, it is sort of business as usual? You just expect that to happen?
I don't think you can just expect it to happen. I think it's a partnership that has to be actively nurtured and constant communication on both sides so that whether it's the council or NEDAC can work within the businesses in the town to make sure that the word is spread as to what the hospital is doing and what they need and what the opportunities may be for growth of other businesses in town.
I'll give you an example there. I mean, but others know about, and we've talked about it earlier, but there's a capital planning process they're going through. It's very intensive to submit to the ministry. I mean, it will take many, many years. I've been sitting on that through the process. And at the end of the day, an interesting question is whether it's for strategic planning or whether it's for this committee to try to understand where that goes could have potentially greater positive, even potentially neutral or negative or lateral, just in terms of shifting, depending on what aspects of the hospitals, if it stays and grows, or if some shifts and moves, or if it goes acute or ambulatory here or somewhere else. And so, and you know, obviously the hospital's got to do what the hospital has to do in terms of providing the best care it can. But what is this committee and what's the role here in terms of understanding that and potentially wanting to speak to it and how it impacts the town?
So what I think I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, the hospital is an important thing in terms of economic development, though some of you may not have explicitly named it in your game changer.
Maybe we should.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it when we talk, yes. So obviously the hospital spends a ton of money, spends $450 million a year, and a big chunk of that is salaries and wages of people who may or may not live in Newmarket. But when we talk about the spin-off benefits, for staff, for the most part, you drive to work, you show up, you leave. You don't spend time in the town other than you went to work and when you left work. You don't necessarily come back out of hours or come back on the weekends unless there's specific reasons. And then a lot of the supplies and those other things, sort of big national contracts, those kinds of things versus local contracts. So I think obviously there are opportunities, and obviously we have the same demands that a Celestica does or others, which is looking for talent. Where does that talent live? How does that talent afford to live here? All of those kinds of components that come in. So it is obviously a behemoth, drives a lot of traffic to the town. A lot of that traffic though comes to the hospital, then leaves.
Some stay overnight at someone's hotel.
Yeah, it may stay at the hotel. I think
Not employees, it's mainly patients.
Yeah, so the other piece is, I think, how does, not necessarily I wouldn't say it's an objective of the hospital to make people stay longer, but it's where can Newmarket capitalize on, over 1 million people coming to this one relatively small section of Newmarket?
No, we had a big discussion on it just at the other side of the hospital. I said, look at we do track the catchment area of people coming into that great hospital. They're coming from unbelievably long ways to come in because of the regional centers that the hospital provides. By the way, they're coming from the south up. Some have to stay longer than critical care. Some stay overnight and kind of stay for, sometimes longer term. And the question then becomes how we capitalizing. And the other thing we talked about was health teams starting from the hospital into the community. A new wave of how that hospital is now, its walls are opening to the rest of the community with partnerships, with new ways of doing things that wasn't there before. And they have the capacity of people needing the care and getting it.
Yeah, and some of that, I think, and because of the evolution of the way health is going, maybe better to think about health versus the hospital specifically. Now, the hospital is obviously the biggest single player, but with an Ontario Health team, the family health teams, the St. Elizabeth Healthcare, the Bay Shores, the other community health that are out in the community, they're not the hospital, but they are healthcare, and obviously the hospital is connected to them. So, I'd encourage us to think, yes, Southlake attracts, like I said, 1 million people a year to this one small part of town, but the tentacles of healthcare are all over and drive lots of drives lots of other things. You look at things like Shoppers Drug Mart or Loblaws or whoever who want, or Shoppers Home Health or whatever, they want to be located close to, ideally, an urgent care center or a family clinic or whatever it is, because that's what's driving the traffic for them.
So I know we're a little past date. With your permission, let's just jump to what's next. And Chris is gonna give us like a quick 2-minute overview, and then we'll see if there are any other comments, and then I'll hand it to the mayor for a formal close, and then we'll get you out of here. So, Chris, there's gonna be some summary notes. I'll generate something that based on what you've done, but Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Glenn. So we're going to take these notes that Glenn's preparing and some of the notes we have in the minutes and start trying to putting them together into areas of commonality and ideas and strategies and priorities. We have a meeting scheduled December 3rd we scheduled it at Joya upstairs in the boardroom. What we want to do is have about a half a meeting to discuss some updates and what we propose, and then have a sort of a social Christmas type of thing and a dinner at Joya. So what we want to do between now and then is kind of summarize some of this and put them into buckets, I guess, and ideas and priorities, and get your buy-in at that point, and then come probably around late January is hold what we're calling a business summit, bring in maybe 50 to 75 members of the business community, maybe at the Old Town Hall, and share some of these ideas that we're thinking about for our strategy. We'll get some engagement going with them, probably make it a breakfast session, make it interactive. So hopefully come out of that meeting at the end of January with some really positive feedback, some good directions from that group. Then between the end of January and we are scheduled our meeting in March, we would at staff take all those ideas and start putting them down into strategies and actions. And by the end of March, hopefully we can come back to NEDAC with the action plan in place, get your endorsement or any changes we need to do. And then following your endorsement, we would then go to council probably late spring to get their approval or endorsement of the 2024 action plan.
Great. Any questions about next steps? Yes.
Not so much questions about next steps, but just, Chris, is it possible to try to lay into calendar or at least, because a lot of people are business people to have a lot of things on the go and travel and everything like that. Are you able, or Elizabeth, able to mock up sort of a tentative schedule, like potential dates that people can start marking off on their calendars, just to make sure we have quorum, et cetera?
Yeah, well, December 3rd, I think, is in your calendars. Yes. The only thing we have to plan is the January Business Summit. I think March is already, we have a regularly scheduled meeting in March, I believe, that's already should be in your calendar. If not, it would be the third Thursday of the March, but we'll let you know. So we have December, end of January, and March that we'll make sure it's in your calendar.
I'll just make a notice of that as well. So anything else as part of the open forum? You're probably talked out. Any other questions, comments, observations that didn't logically fit under the other agenda items that you'd like to share before we formally wrap things up this evening? Okay, so I'll just, oh, yeah, Edmund?
Just one sentence. I think the general idea that I've got from everybody's participation is that we're thinking more creatively. I think that's a good direction. Well done.
Let me just make a note. So we are and we need to think more creatively. Thank you. Anyone else? Last call? Yes, Mayor? Yeah, you got the mic. Yeah, thank you.
I always, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news because I don't know what the future is.
Let's go to somebody else. No.
But I think as part of our job in NEDAC is to also look for potential pitfalls and troubles in the future. We have enjoyed the longest expansion in history, I guess. And I think as NEDAC members, we should also look for potential black clouds on the horizon. Because development is not only economy going up, but sometimes it goes down. So I'm just saying that this should be always in back of our mind. What is the escape? What is the backup plan in case of difficulties?
Great, thank we'll make a note of that as well. Anyone else? Okay, so just really quickly, before I hand things to the mayor, I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity and the honor and privilege of working with all of you. Thank you for wrapping your heads around these big and important issues. Thank you, as Edmund has said, for trying to think about this in new and innovative and creative ways. We've just begun the work today. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're not finalizing anything. Chris and staff will go away and do the hard work and bring the intelligence to these ideas, and then bring them back for you to look at it all again. Or at least I hope you're laughing, Chris. I hope they'll bring some intelligence to all of this. And Elizabeth will. And bring it back to the group again for your feedback. Group by group, I mean both NEDAC, and of course it will also come to council as the strategy as well. So thank you again for doing terrific work and sharing your wisdom and your perspective and your insight. Mr. Mayor, over to you, sir.
Yeah, it's been a long session, we're overdue, so I'll just say very briefly, thank you. I know there's a lot of busy people in the room, but the business experience and the ideas and the enthusiasm that will be brought to this table today, but also into future meetings, is greatly appreciated with the town of Newmarket. I hope we'll be able to bring some one-off challenges to throughout the year and the next years that we have to, and opportunities that we would like input on. And also perhaps there's going to be some opportunities for some people in this group to work on some projects on the side as well. So not the side, but as a subgroup, for example, when we start to look in more detailed way at marketing or some of those issues, maybe there's some people with those expertise who will put in a little bit of extra time in that area. So. But the long and short of it is, thank you very, very much for the input, not just only today, but that ongoing into helping us form a strategy and to the town of Newmarket in the coming years, because as Merrick has pointed out, there's challenges ahead, but there's also a lot of exciting opportunities. And I think with the great minds in this room and the excitement and the business summit coming up, we'll have a lot of good insight into how to meet all of those challenges and opportunities. So thanks very much.
Thank you. So, to the clerk, is there anything we need to do? No?
Meeting's adjourned.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.